I think probably we'll do well. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, no, I just have a couple of things to add real quickly. I think you know what Abhi said in the first session about bringing risk and compliance upfront and trying to integrate it as much with business. Or get that view is really important. I've had the opportunity to work with one really progressive institution that looked at if my RM was going to meet someone or talk to someone on a mobile app, they would actually try and search for that customer across multiple data sources. And right up front, it would just indicate a red, green, or an orange and tell them whether to even continue the conversation. You need approval, or you can't even talk to this person. So the idea of funneling customers in and analyzing that risk right at the point of arrival of that customer and using mobile apps and things like that. So I think a lot of institutions have recognized the importance of looking at risk and compliance upfront and are trying to integrate that as part of businesses. But the one concern I have, especially in India, is around data privacy. It's a huge concern, and it's also because of I mean, you can walk into Palika Bazaar and someone will offer you, a set of phone numbers, classified as, oh, these are the top guys who own a BMW, these are the guys who have a prepaid Airtel customer. I mean, it's actually amazing what's available. We've actually done this ourselves, where we've gone and tried to see what's available and what's not. So I'm really hoping that there's some really strong regulation around data privacy, because I mean, there's some genuine concerns, right? I mean, for example, today when I booked a flight to fly in here, I used ClearTrip. It's an app, and within ClearTrip it said, "Oh, do you want to book a car using Uber?" Now we both, I mean, and I pay a lot of attention to when I say I agree to terms and conditions, what I'm agreeing to, right? Because everyone wants access to your photos, to your phone book, to pretty much everything. But the idea is now I'm open ClearTrip, I'm trying to book a flight, but now there's Uber. If I click Uber there, what happens to my data? Does all this data also now go to Uber or not? Because that's not my, the app that's calling. But these technologies have become so pervasive in our lives, at least in mine. I mean, I use an Uber everywhere, I stopped driving. That I don't know how much of my data is actually out there. But someone like Vic would be really happy in some sense, because if he has access to that data in some kind of a formal way with customer consent, it's a gold mine for them, and from a risk and a compliance perspective. But I'm just scared of the amount of data that's there. So I think one of the points that you touched about in terms of regulation of data is something that I'm really eagerly looking forward to in terms of what's done, especially here in India.
I wouldn't be surprised if you get a call from somebody saying, "Oh, you're an hyperpad, do you want to do this?"
Yeah, I think I really agree with this, because given a feedback form and then they ask you your date of birth, spouse's name, her date of birth. I mean, why do you need that? Yeah, and obviously that's data gathering exercise, and of course you will win a BMW once you fill it in, and there is a chance you'll win a BMW. Never. But this data privacy thing is really, really important issue for us, because you can use it both ways. I mean, it gets used for all fraudulent purposes. I mean, at one time I did, just because I had some spare time, I sat on Facebook and I just picked up a random person. And just a random person. The amount of information you can gather using Facebook, Google about one person, you will be amazed at what you can do. So I think that is one of the biggest evolving challenges, especially for developing markets.
What we are hearing now is need for more regulations, and we're already talking about a lot of regulations out there. So, and again, what we've seen, whenever a regulator comes and conducts a review, okay, you have findings for sure, and then you work for about 9 months to a year. You think you've closed the gap, and then they come again and say, okay, there's a problem elsewhere. So, what does this mean? I mean, number of regulations, the number of interventions coming from the regulators. From a global organization perspective, Vic, how do you see? I mean, this is more like a closing comment to that conversation. But how do you, from a global organization, the kind of regulations, how will it impact on the business side of it?
I think to be honest, we are effectively now doing remediation. All financial institutions are now in remediation. If we have done the right things last 20 years, we will be here. So there is a lot of catch-up to be done. Do we see the regulations suddenly stopping? No, of course not. We see them becoming more stringent because money laundering, money launderers are very, very clever. They do it for a living, 24/7. So you have to continue to step up your game time and time up again. And sometimes, not sometimes, most of the times the regulations are actually meant to get us close to that and close the gap even further. So I don't see the regulatory pressure reducing, I only see it increasing. And plus, with that, the personal liabilities will start to go up.
Yeah, agreed. But for that one reason, I don't mind voting for Donald Trump. He seems to be promising for every new regulation he wants to retire 3 regulations. That seems to be attractive option.
It depends on which way you retires and what say put
Okay, and then we can kind of seamlessly move into the other piece. Business needs. We spoke about it on the introduction side. Business needs versus risk and compliance management. Now, where do you draw the line? Is it a line drawn in the sand? Do you ring fence it? Do you build a concrete wall around it? So, from a business perspective, and then we will move on to look at the digital side of it, how the technology is helping. But first, your views, Vic.
So I'm not really sure I fully understand your question. Can you just
Business needs grow, develop, be more profitable. The other side, more and more risk and compliance requirements, cost.
Yeah, I guess it's not either or. You got to do both as an organization. Everybody has got to deliver growth. Everybody has got to provide ROIs to its investors, etc. At the same time, you have to work within the regulatory framework. We are a regulated industry, so there is no demand of that. We heard about RDA and its regulations. Absolutely right. So our regulations are pain? I don't think so. They just keep us honest. If you don't do it, we'll have the same scenario over and over again, which none of us can afford. And the second bit is, and I think it was discussed earlier, cost of non-compliance. You will not do it now, but if you have to do the remediation and the legal pay fees and the fines, that's much more, and that eats into your business much more than actually putting the compliance in place right now. It might cost you 2 cents now, or when you do it 3 years down the line, it's going to cost you $3.
True. Somebody did mention that one thing that can shut down an organization, it's non-compliance. True to that point. So, Prashant, from your perspective, how is the technology world helping organizations, the global organization, stay compliant, manage their risk? Your views?
So, I think organizations are obviously to support business. Just closing off Vic's comment about it. We're all here because we want to do business, and I think risk and compliance not necessarily need to play catch up, but need to be in step with business every part of the way to facilitate business in a more transparent and an honest manner. So I think the regulation is absolutely necessary, but in the digital world, in terms of the amount of computing power we have today, the amount of technology we have available, the amount of data sources that we have available, I think we're getting extremely better and efficient at being able to manage them. So I'll give you a small example. So for example, today, a lot of people, a lot of financial institutions partner with, for example, e-commerce players. And that is so when they're going to lend actually to, let's say, one of the small merchants. So before they really, apart from the piece of paper they had from the Shop Establishment Act or something to say that, I'm a sole proprietor or one of those, they didn't really have much data on them. But today, because all of that data is probably available to me digitally across e-commerce players, because they're all selling online as well. So they have a lot of data to say what was their sales volume, what's their month-on-month growth, what were the customer reviews, how many of their orders got back. And to be able to mine that data and to be able to tell you a risk score on this particular customer in almost near real time is actually fantastic. Right? I mean, we've been working with a couple of institutions to be able to do that, and where we're getting actually data from, obviously this is with consent, so I still feel okay about a lot of this before someone, this is with consent because the merchant has gone and applied for the loan. So, at that point, you take the appropriate consent, making sure he's fully aware. But this has become, I think, a really fantastic ecosystem, so if you will, where you can mitigate the risk, at least from a risk perspective. I think you still have to apply certain measures from a compliance perspective, but from a lending risk or a credit risk perspective, it's fantastic what we are able to do today, as opposed to what we are doing just hardly 3 years ago.
Okay, and two things here. What Vic said in terms of that we are in a phase of remediation, and somebody raised the issue of risk culture as well. And if you look at it and I think both organizations as well as regulators are both very, very aware of these two, the importance of these two. And I don't think at this point of time that question of business versus risk is kind of the right perspective, and businesses do understand the value that risk or compliance brings on the table when it's done right. And a great story for that is probably what MAS in Singapore has done around the entire balance scorecards for insurance agents, right? Again, it's a brilliant example of how you bring back risk and put it on the table of your business guys and make them accountable for it. And the scars of 2008 are very, very fresh in everyone's mind. So I don't think that you would find a single business manager at this point in time who would say, I really don't care as long as I meet my bottom line or my top line. So I think that's where we are coming from right now.
Great thought, and I will stay with that, Shubhar. Just want to get one more view from you on. We're almost looking to talk about return on investment for the risk program you're building, right? Now, what are your key measures to define what your return on investment is? You have seen any trends in what the companies are talking about, how they measure return on investment?
So somebody I know who's a pioneer in this field said one thing which I really believe is the truth. Let's not call it return on investment, but rather let's call it value on investment, because going back to what Ovik said right at the beginning, right? When you call it return on investment, you stress on the efficiency part. How many of FTEs would I remove? How many orphan controls would I get rid of? And so on and so forth. And it just becomes an exercise in numbers without having to remember what was the intent that you started with. So when you talk about the value on investment, that's where the effectiveness of the program comes in. Yes, I would remove orphan controls. Not because they are just add cost to my system, but the whole fact that these orphan controls consume and probably take up a lot of information within the system, which could in turn lead to problems of itself. So my perspective on return on investment is the fact that if you start to see the value coming out of it, rather than trying to bring it back down to a cost versus return kind of equation, that's where we will see returns from any kind of risk or compliance programs that we have there.
Yes,